I'm Giovanni Chavez, the president of the California Young Democrats. Thank you all for joining us in this call. We're excited to see a lot of young Democrats are interested in getting involved in their local communities. And just for a heads up, in case you don't know what a central committee is, your central committee is your local voting body for your county party. So they vote on resolutions, on endorsements. They're involved with having their own committees. And they also get allocated their own delegates at the state party. So you'd be a delegate at your county party and possibly at your state party. And I'm just going to pass it around to our panelists and give them each an opportunity to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Mark, since you're first on my screen.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Giovanni, for your leadership and for putting all of us together. Everybody on this panel is completely a reflection of the state of California. So I just want to thank you for mirroring that, but also having this dialogue and this conversation, because that's the number one thing is what is a central committee? And so thank you for putting this together. And Mark Gonzalez, chair of the LA County Democratic Party.
Hey, Rebecca.
Hey guys, Becca Taylor, chair of the San Diego County Democratic Party, former Veterans Caucus Young Dem chair. Excited to be here.
And Honey Mahogany.
Hi everyone, Honey Mahogany, she, they pronouns. I'm the chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party. I'm also on the LGBTQ caucus for the state party.
And Igor Tragoop.
Hi, it's an honor to join you all and join my esteemed colleagues, friends with whom I've been in the trenches for so many years, including in the Young Dems. I'm Igor Tregov, coming to you live from Chochenyo Alani land in Berkeley. I use he, him pronouns. I have the honor of chairing the Alameda County Democratic Party. I also serve as chair of the California Democratic Party's Environmental Caucus, and previously served with Giovanni and others, including Chair Taylor, on the California Young Democrats in a number of roles.
Thank you all for joining us. And just for the folks in attendance kind of know the process we're going to have. I have 3 questions, really. The bulk of this conversation is supposed to be between the membership and the panelists. After each question, the attendees will be given the chance to ask follow-ups on that particular question. And we'll explore the topics from there. But really, this is all meant to be a resource to all of you, so Young Dems can choose whether they want to run or not. And the first question is, should you run? What considerations should you look through when you're deciding whether you should run for your local central committee or not? And this time we'll go the opposite way. So Igor, you can go first.
Yeah, thank you. That existential question is really important for any office, I hope before you jump in, you do give yourself the time and spaciousness to do some introspection, some soul searching around should you run? Because the thing is, a campaign can be grueling depending on where you're running. But if you get elected, or I should say, when you get elected, I see a lot of folks here. Everyone here is, I think, definitely has what it takes to win. And a campaign is just a start. That's the easy part, because then you are kind of stuck for 4 years on a central committee. So you have to know that, number one, this is something that you have the bandwidth to do, that you have the calling to do, and that there's something that is missing. Your voice not being there will, or if your voice is not there, basically there is a perspective, there is some representation, there'll be some conversation, there'll be a skill set, there'll be a talent that will be missing from the table. I would say this though, I was born in Ukraine, and democracy means something to me. And I think everyone who wants to run should run. What I will also say, having served the last 4 years in an elected role, but previous to that, having served my central committee in a variety of non-elected roles, every central committee is going to have different rules. On our central committee, you don't have to be an elected member. You can be an alternate, you can be an associate member, you can be a club rep. All of that still entitles you on our central committee, and I think on many central committees, to be able to move, introduce, sponsor, second resolutions, to have a vote in committee, to chair committees in some cases, without being an elected member. Now, there are definitely perks that come with being unelected. Probably the most valuable one is, of course, being able to participate in endorsements of local candidates. And that's why, especially in urban areas like mine and Chair Gonzalez and Chair Mahogany, it can be quite a ways. It's a very coveted spot. The thing is, though, that there is a lot of work that is involved beyond that once in 2 year opportunity to endorse candidates. And I say that we just had our unity dinner. It was probably 60-hour weeks for the last month to get there, to be able to make sure that we keep the lights on and that we do what needs to be done to save our democracy from haters that are trying to infiltrate even deep blue Alameda County. All of that takes work. So you just need to make sure that this is something that you really want to do in your heart of hearts, and that you will find the time to do this when you get elected. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Igor. Next up, Honey Mahogany.
Sure. Well, I think Chair Tregu gave a great answer, but I think one thing that I would add to whether or not you should run for the Democratic Central Committee where you live is how familiar you are with the work of the committee. I don't think it can be easily explained to somebody. I think that you need to actually go and see the meetings, because there is definitely a lot of work that we do, but there's also a lot of drama, a lot of politicking, a lot of back and forth. And so really knowing, I think, what you're getting yourself into is probably the most important thing. So for anyone considering running, I would say go and attend your local Democratic Party meetings. Many of them are online these days. Check out a couple meetings, talk to some of the members and get their perspective on what it's like. And then if you're still like, yes, this is something I want to do it. I don't think that there's any right way, and we'll get into that later, but I don't think that there's any right way or reason to run for the Democratic Party. I think that everybody has their own perspectives. Everyone has something that they bring to the table. But one thing that I will say is that I think we need a lot more grassroots folks, a lot more people who have, as Chair Tregu said, unique perspectives that they can bring to the party, but also people that are willing to do the work. Because I will say sometimes people get on just to be a vote. And that's the most frustrating, because it really stifles a party and its ability to do things like voter outreach, or even really effectively advocate to the state party and the national party. So yes, especially if you are, a grassroots organizer, or, not already, an elected position, or haven't been doing this for a long time and entrenched in democratic politics, we do need to hear more of your voices in the party. So I would encourage you to run.
Absolutely. Thank you. Becca Taylor.
Yeah, so I mean, Chair Mahogany and Tregu, they hit the nail on the head. You really have to, I would recommend, even like our meetings are open, sddemocrats.org, signing up and attending a central committee meeting, or getting involved in some of the clubs. Figure out if it is something that you want to do, getting elected is half the battle, right? You know, and we'll get into how to do that later. But actually, we want people who are more interested in, I mean, instead of just doing or focusing on endorsements, we want people who are going to be interested in serving year round. And there's a lot that goes into that, not just grassroots and voter outreach. I mean, community events. In particular, our central committee, we meet twice a month. So you would kind of even just want to check with your schedule. Is this something you have the capacity for? Because it is not just a meeting or two. There are a lot of dynamics that you'll be stepping into. And you'll want to tread carefully, you know, and we can get into that in the next two questions as well. But overall, though, one of my favorite phrases is like, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So we need your voices. I mean, you are the leaders right now. There's no such thing as, I'm going to wait, you know, till I'm older. No, you're leaders now, and we need your voices. So I would encourage you to make sure that you have the capacity to talk to other people and say, hey, what's it really, you know, like? Do you like it? Because the worst thing would be for you to get elected and go to two meetings, realize you hate it, or that it wasn't something it wasn't what you were looking for, and then that causes a vacancy, and we have to turn around and recruit somebody else to serve in your spot. So there are other ways you can serve, but this is one of a critical one. It's a seat that you'll be in for 4 years. So on to the next.
Yes, thank you. Mark Gonzalez?
No, echo everything the previous chairs, my colleagues have been saying. Just the other sort of pieces to add to it is, number one is being an activist, being active in party politics can sometimes be very expensive. So figuring out if that's something that you can afford to do. The party is really good about offering fee waivers. Secondarily to that, it's part of the process, reading the rules. I always tell people read the rules and sort of understand the room in which you're going into. Part of running and making that decision is figuring out your ballot designation, figuring out who can sign those petitions for you. And of course, I think that the goal here, though, is the tide has changed a little bit, especially with young voters. Rather than being straight down ticket Democratic, most young voters, such as many of the folks on here, are more issue-based first than party-based first. And so I think in order for us to be a better party in understanding our big tent, we have to understand the issues, especially those of the younger voters that we're asking to turn out. And so, you know, folks like me who've been around for a long time might think of certain things that are so, you know, typical that we've usually done. But, you know, with you guys having to educate us sort of on the local issues or what's really affecting you guys, or even in terms of technology, that's really helpful to folks like myself to understand, you know, where the direction is headed in the party, not just locally, but nationally, of course. And so making that decision, it is a lot of work. I remember I first ran when I was about 20 years old, and, you know, I was really nervous about it, and having your name on the ballot is really nerve wracking, but it's also really special as well. It's something you certainly do keep. And, you know, you're educating folks within your network of friends and family about what it is that you do. And, you know, it's exciting. And so you just have to sort of weigh those options. Obviously, if you have the time, like many folks were saying, I started off as somebody's alternate first, and then sort of had to learn the ropes. And then, you know, most of the time people ask if this is a paid position. It's not. And so it's a lot of your time because you love the party and you want to get involved. And this is one way of doing that. San Francisco, I think, has it a lot harder. There's a lot more, there's a smaller amount of spots, but there's, you know, it's very competitive. So I give it up to Honey and the work that you do up there, because it's a little bit more competitive up there, and they have to open up PACs and they have to do other ways of real campaigning. LA doesn't necessarily have that yet. We're getting there, but you know, San Francisco, and I praise Honey for those pieces of it, because they're very opposite. Our delegation is certainly bigger with 24 assembly districts. We have more membership, but San Francisco is certainly harder. So obviously looking at the demographics of your area as well, and seeing if you have a good shot at getting elected as well.
Thank you all. We're going to get into a little bit of the logistics of, like, you know, how you run, how you win, that sort of thing. But before that, does anybody have questions on the first question I asked, like just making the decision within yourself of should you run? Okay, going once, going twice. All right. The next question, here's more of the logistics of figuring out how you do it. How do you run? what exactly do you have to do to run for Central Committee? And for this one, Honey Mahogany, you can go first.
Ooh, this is the technical one. Okay, well, there's a couple things you need to do. So you need to go to and register as a candidate. I believe you do have to be a United States citizen. You can be appointed if you are not a citizen. But I believe that's still the case, right? Is that right? That you have to be a citizen to run in the DCCC? I believe you do. They were trying to change that.
It depends.
It depends.
For LA, I think we're if you're not a citizen, you're allowed to run for the seat. I think it was a bill that got passed.
Okay, great. So then they have changed that. Okay, so thank you for correcting me. I wasn't sure. I believe that you can then run even if you are not a citizen to the Democratic County Central Committee. That's great. But you do have to register with your local office. And then oftentimes what you will have to do is also open up a bank account. Like people don't talk about that as much. But if you are going to fundraise, which many folks do, especially here in San Francisco, people do fundraise for their campaigns. You need to do that in order to print out flyers. Oops, someone is unmuted. So we're getting an echo. Thank you. So if you want to print out flyers and do other, promotions, you'll need to fundraise for that. The other thing is oftentimes what people do in order to make it easier to run is they join slates. So they get together with a group of like-minded people who want to run on a similar platform, and they get together to run because number one, that way you can kind of pool your money together and resources together, print out flyers with everybody's names on them. That makes it automatically cheaper. You can also strategize because part of the job is getting endorsements, because when you go to the local Democratic parties or organizations to get endorsements, not only do you get to say, I was endorsed by, the LGBTQ Democratic Club, but they may also send out their own mailers advertising you as their chosen candidates and encouraging the people who follow them and who listen to them to vote for you. Going to all of those meetings can be really intense. It's a lot of work, especially if you have a day job or other responsibilities. It can be a lot. When you're on a slate, sometimes if you can't make it, it's okay because your other slate members are there to represent you and your slate. So there's a lot of benefits to being on slates. If you can be on multiple slates, that's also great. Sometimes slates don't allow you to do that, but sometimes they do. And yeah, so those are the things I'm talking about. I'm sure I'm forgetting things, but hopefully my fellow chairs can fill in the blanks.
Yeah, thank you. Mark, why don't you go next?
Yeah, same sentiment, but also just, making sure that when you go to register, because you have a certain time period in which you can turn in those signatures, I would verify those. Most counties, I think, allow you to verify the signatures before you turn them in. Typically, it's the first letter, the first name, and the last name on the signature to verify that they are registered Democrats. Because it's only every 4 years. It used to be every 2 years. Now it's every 4. It is a long sort of commitment, but part of that is, what Honey was saying is joining slates, working with your local assembly member, making sure he or she, or however they identify, endorse you and support you, because that's also one way of getting support from your local area as well. As much as you can on social media with said slate, making sure that slate is diverse and representative of the district as well is always helpful. And, I think oftentimes you might have more than whatever number is allocated for your area to run. And there might be some friends outside of that number. And, just working together to come up with a commitment that they could be your alternate or other ways in which either the member, if they get an alternate position, can appoint you. But, again, it's just, raising money for your slate, raising money for yourself, raising your name ID, figuring out your ballot designation. And so that's often just word of mouth and working with your members on that. If you guys can afford to do penny slates, or there's slates in your area that exist that you guys can do grassroots fundraising for to be able to get yourself to do that. There are many folks within the Dem Party who can help you strategize on those pieces as well. But that's what I would start with.
Okay, thank you. Becca?
Hey guys, yeah, trying to not just repeat everybody else, but I will say when you're collecting your signatures, they tell you a minimum of 20. I would collect at least 30, maximum of 40. Definitely do go double check. Not only that people are registered to vote, but that they filled out the right way, because sometimes it would be awful to have you go through all this work and then you don't qualify to run. So make sure that people remember to write apartment B when they're spelling things out, stuff like that. If they fill out or they sign it how they sign their ballot usually, because if it doesn't match, then that will get thrown out. So little things like that. Definitely agree with building slates. Come up with a set of values that you agree, something that speaks more to just the fact that like, hey, we're Democrats, and you can check Voters Edge. Usually once you've qualified as a candidate, they'll let you post for free like what your 3 top goals are, and like what your main issues that you care about, which kind of tells voters like these are the types of candidates you would vote for to endorse, which is very helpful. Letting people know what you stand for, right? That's why you're doing that. Hopefully is one of the reasons you're getting involved. And then you have till December 8th. I'd highly recommend getting your papers as soon as possible, and then just be bopping around to different Democratic events. Also reach out to your friends and family, people you know are registered to vote. You could also register somebody to vote and then have them sign. But if you do that, without getting too much in the weeds, I would like copy machine their voter registration form and turn that in when you turn the rest of your stuff in. And make sure that they turn in their voter reg form right away. And I think I hit all the other parts. Also, as far as spending money, at least for us, I think it's the statewide. Once you hit 2,000 is when you have to open up, fill out all the different paperwork to have your candidate, your committee and fundraise. If it's like $200 that you're spending on the race, you don't have to fill out paperwork for all of that. But having a committee allows you to fundraise into it and other people to give you money. So with that, I will pass it on. Igor, I think, is the last.
Yeah, go ahead, Igor.
Excited to be cleanup crew here, which means all of my colleagues have shared all the important things. Look, I will actually, I'm kind of, because I'm glutton for punishment, I am taking a grad school class right now where it's asking me to do a campaign plan in real time. And so that basically my re-election is my campaign plan. So I've been thinking a little bit about this, and I will share some lessons learned from when I ran 4 years ago. Lesson number 1, this is a very down ballot race. And so there is just no way that you're going to be able to get every Democrat in your district to know what this is. However, it's a tremendous educational opportunity, and little things really matter. When I ran, there were, I believe, 8 seats for which one could get elected, and about 25 people running. And actually, when I started at the end, or at the very beginning, when the votes were being counted, I was in 11th or 12th spot. So I was like, well, this is going to be interesting. I'll just keep, going to these victory parties and getting celebrating win or lose. And then the results kept changing throughout the process. And because there are opportunities for folks to turn in ballots day off, and they take a while to get counted. And like lesson number 1 is the late ballot folks, those tend to be our people. Those folks tend to vote more progressively. But we need to give them the opportunity to know what this is. So the last day, we had a bit of an operation. I ran on a slate of 8, and we solicited some volunteer assistance, and we actually mapped out the busiest polling locations. This was pre-COVID, just barely. And so, things have changed slightly, but there's still a lot of value, I think, to having some coverage, at least there's no way you're going to be able to hit every polling location, but have a field operation that hits as many locations as you can that tend to be high traffic. And if you have a slate card, I ran on a slate called East Bay Labor Progressives. So lesson number 2 as well is work with labor if you can. Try to get labor endorsements. Some unions can and will endorse. Some will only endorse union members, but others will endorse folks that seek to be allies to the labor community. But give them something that they can walk with to the polls, that they can carry to the polls. Obviously, do it at a principal distance. There is a 100-foot line, so don't cross that. But you can talk to folks and be friendly, and 9 out of 10 times, they will not know what a central committee is. And so they will be excited that there is a candidate, an actual candidate that they can talk to, and they will take that thing to the polls. And I think those votes that came in late, those were the day of votes. I think that's a key lesson in addition to what has been mentioned. I would also say, you know, be kind, be graceful. There's no, it does not serve you at all to be oppositional. There are folks running that may be on other slates. There may be folks running as independents. Chances are you will probably, whether you get elected or not, they will probably get elected, or they will be someone's alternate. You will be working with them. There was an endorsement I got from the Sierra Club with someone who was not on our slate, and I worked with him to, Alfred Wu, who is a former Young Dem, and he created this beautiful slate mailer that we were able to get out to Sierra Club members just in the nick of time. And so it, you know, it makes sense to work with everyone. And I think just in terms of the third lesson is find something on the ballot that falls well, that you believe in. It could be a school bond measure that is in March. It could be something else, but chances are there may be some folks who could be walking for that, maybe some labor unions, maybe some teachers, and whether they can officially walk for you, if you walk with them for that ballot measure, if they choose to, they can also carry your lit. So that is another way to get in front of more voters on the weekends. All that stuff really matters. 6th and 11th spot, I believe, 1,000 votes or so separated them. So you know, every vote really does count. The last thing I'll say on the citizen or non-citizen voting, some central committees have approved rules changes, mirroring what the California Democratic Party just did, allowing folks who are of voting age and would be Democrats if they could register to vote, if they're non-citizens, to be able to do it. Others, like my central committee, are in the process of that. So there is a tangible rules change that every central committee can choose to take or not. But I am hopeful that all of them eventually will, so that we can be fully inclusive in the Democratic Party.
Thanks, Igor. Yeah, before we open it up for questions, I kind of wanted to, add some more info on what Becca was saying on, the steps and the process to filing to run. Usually, when you file for something, even if it's not a central committee, you go to your county office, they give you papers. From there, you collect signatures of folks that live in your district. California Elections Code actually mandates a certain amount of signatures. It's 20 through 40. And as Becca was alluding to, you want to be on the higher end of that in case you have some invalid signatures. And then you would turn that in, and that you'd formally file to run, you'd choose your ballot designation and all that. And then you'd be a candidate on the ballot, on the primary, just like Joe Biden and everyone else. So that's the process. Now, do we have any questions?
Hi guys, I have a question. I guess just going back to the idea of grassroots fundraising and the support that the Dem Party can provide for starting candidates. If you guys have any thoughts on that or can help me out.
Yeah, panelists, any of you could jump on that question if you want. Floor is yours.
Yeah, so Thomas, if I understood your question correctly, and please pipe in. If I didn't, you're asking about whether the Democratic Party itself institutionally can provide support to grassroots candidates?
Yes, and just like overall support, I guess, in general for grassroots candidates. I guess that would be my question.
Yeah. So I think it's really important, actually, and I'm going to go back to something I think my colleagues mentioned, that it's really valuable to have grassroots candidates run for and get elected to the Central Committee. If that's your experience, then it's just easier to empathize with what it feels like to be one for elected office at whatever level. That was actually my start in the Central Committee back now 14 years ago. As a 23-year-old kid, I was running for an elected office. I didn't know what I was doing. And the first endorsement I received was the East Bay Young Democrats. And the second endorsement I received was the Democratic Central Committee. And I got this letter mailed to me. I had no idea what a Central Committee was prior to that. And it's like, oh, wow, they actually sought me out. And so I wanted to pay it forward. That's how I got involved. We have last year we had an 85% win record between June and November for candidates and ballot measured we endorsed. That helped us flip a Republican sheriff seat that had been uncontested for decades, with one of the first Latina Democrats to be elected to sheriff ever anywhere in the state, possibly the nation. Complete grassroots candidate. Previous to this, no institutional support. We backed her up because I got elected as part of a class of folks that also ran people-powered grassroots campaigns. While the Democratic Party itself usually will not get engaged in, hand-picking Central Committee candidates, because that would be a little bit inequitable. What some Central Committees do, mine included, is hold trainings for candidates, and Central Committee candidates are welcome to attend those trainings, and it's everything from how to run to fundraising, and compliance, everything in between. It's really useful information. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And for the trainings that you just mentioned,
I'm sorry, Thomas, we have like multiple folks with their
Oh,
hands.
yeah, go for it. Sorry.
Yeah, we're just gonna move on to another question, but thank you, and feel free to put your question on the group chat. Sierra, I saw you've had your hand for a while.
Hi, yes. Thank you for this. I'm running for Central Committee and I'm very nervous about it. So this was really great. I just had a question about ballot designation. I was going to put community organizer on mine because I work for California Environmental Voters, but some folks say that that's not the strongest designation. So do you guys have any thoughts on that or any ideas as to if I were to do a different one, which one would be stronger?
Yeah, we're gonna touch on that on like the next question, like how do you win? But ballot designation, I would say, is probably the most important like factor here, just because there's such low information races. But let's piggyback on that on the third question we asked Sierra.
Okay, thank you.
And Daniel.
Thank you all for sharing your experience here. I'm very interested in learning more about what the day-to-day looks like, what these meetings actually look like, and I was kind of struggling to find when my committee meets. So I would love to hear your experiences as to what sort of discussions you all have when you meet and what that process looks like.
I'll do a quick recap. Number one, I would also say just to everybody here, learn Robert's rules. That's what governs. And also each committee has their own bylaws, and then they usually default to Robert's rules, which are rules in which meetings, how they're run. And so typically you've got an agenda that gets sent out that'll tell you what the meeting's about. And then minutes, which are taken, which tells you what happened at the last meeting, and it's what's happening during the meeting. And you'll start off the meeting with approving those. Sometimes there's a fight over whether or not something should be included, if it's contentious or just whatever. For us, we usually have a consent calendar, which means, things that, so basically for our central committee, it's broken down into different regions. So north, south, East County. And then they endorse locally, and then they send their recommendations on, and that goes to the full central committee to be ratified. So, and that's ballot, that's ballot initiatives, it's candidates. We also have resolutions sometimes that kind of, we have a resolutions committee that'll forward those. And then, with each piece, the members, there's a motion made to approve. It's seconded, and then, a couple speakers on each side, and it's voted on. And it goes through that for each item. And speaking for San Diego Central Committee, we used to meet in person prior to COVID. And our full central committees are going to remain on Zoom, but we're allowing our local or regional regions if they decide to go meeting in person again. So you might want to look up if your region is meeting in person versus not. But our meetings can range from half an hour to probably the longest one was 6 hours. I'm not doing that again. I've sworn I will break up our endorsement meetings, lesson learned. People just wanted, and we have a time certain end, and then people kept motioning to extend to finish because they really wanted everything done, which is great. I mean, we had a 76% win record, not quite as high as yours, but we had 201 candidates. So, but typically that's what it looks like. And in between election cycles, we also have sometimes different speakers and workshops, and for us, we're not going to meet just to meet. Like there's business is what they call it, to meet and talk about. So that is the very, very, very short version of what it's like. But usually, and then most of the meetings will start off with public comment, like 1 minute per person. People can make announcements that they're running for office, or that their club is meeting at this time, or they're having a fundraiser or whatever. And so, on average, I'd say probably like an hour and a half maybe an hour is your regular meeting time, unless there's something contentious, and that's when everything gets kind of squirrely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's move on to the last question, just because it's the meatiest one and the one that is probably going to be the most valuable to folks. And that's, how do you win? I know Sierra mentioned ballot designations. I have my own story for that. When I ran for Central Committee, the last election cycle, I remember I was like talking to the city clerk, and they were trying to get me to run under law student. And I was just like, if I go as law student, I'm going to lose. I had done my research ahead of time. You have to pick a vocation, an occupation, or a profession. Right. So at the time I was doing an internship at a tenants rights nonprofit, Basta Inc. And I was able to convince the city clerk to allow me to choose tenants rights advocate, which ended up being a very, very good choice because I got top 4. Community organizer, while it's a good ballot designation, there's probably going to be other folks who choose the same exact one. So you really want to get very creative there. Do your research on like the rules before walking into the office. And look, you might have to, get a little contentious with the city clerk, but you want to make sure that you don't get, cornered into picking a ballot designation that's not going to allow you to win. With that being said, I will shoot it off to Becca Taylor. How do you win?
Yeah, words out of my mouth. Ballot designation is critical. So for myself, I chose gerontologist, which is study of aging in older adults. It's a lot of, what I do for work, but also veterans advocate. And I mean, especially in my region, San Diego, that was winning. And I'd actually started off in Central Committee as a volunteer. I was somebody's you kind of get your foot in the door as somebody's alternate usually, unless it's a club associate in our committee, you could get on that way. But so I won with the veterans advocate gerontologist, and they actually said, "Oh, what is incumbent next?" Because you could put that, and that I feel like is a death sentence. I mean, it's not for everybody. It just depends on your region, but especially like Trump had just been elected, all these kinds of crazy things, and I said, "Nope, I'm not doing that." So even this time, I submitted and got approved. Yeah, gerontologist, veterans advocate. Try to think of like what. So if you're community organizing, what issues are you organizing around? Like what's the critical work that your company is doing? Like if you were to go on their website, it says we advocate for workers' rights. Boom, you could do something like that. And that I do agree. Yeah, Gio's right. Like it gives somebody a better picture of like if they're not even going to look up anything and they're throwing away all the mailers, but they see that versus something else. Versus, I mean, community volunteers not bad, or community organizer. I've seen community volunteer come up a lot lately, but trying to kind of just think about what it is you care a lot about, what you do, and try to go with that. And they give you 3 options. So, and it's only 3 words. And sometimes, and you have to separate it by like a slash. So I have gerontologist / veterans advocate. So if you have more than one thing, or if you have a different combination of words, you could do first choice, second, third. Then you'll have to provide supportive evidence. That's not hard. It's not as hard as you think. A lot of times they just want to call your boss or look at your, if you have, I mean, if you graduated as a student of something, your major, whatever, they're not going to like sit there and really criticize everything, but they give you 3 options so that if your first one doesn't get approved, then maybe your second one does, or maybe your third one. So you can kind of, play around with it. Definitely, I would say taking advantage of like I said,
what the flip is good, Family Webby?
Hello. Hi. All right. So, okay, they might be a little too young to be on central committee, but learning early, I like it. All right. So definitely getting together with slates. Social media is free. Your friends who say, I don't want to talk to other voters. Okay, cool. If you share my information, I can't tell you how many people said, oh, my friend posted this and I have no idea what it's for, but they shared it on Facebook, so I voted for you. And I said, great. Locally in San Diego, our labor council actually does labor 101s. You attend that. It's not a guarantee that you'll get on their slate, but like understanding the labor process, and obviously you have to like resonate with their values and fill out a questionnaire. And for different each club, our clubs, a lot of them have they put together their own slate. And so I would just say doing outreach early, putting yourself out there, letting people know you're running and why. A lot of times, like if I don't know people, I mean, obviously I can go to Register of Voters and get the list, and that is what I do. Not everybody does that though. So putting yourself out there, letting people know you're interested in running, know you're interested in looking to build a slate, and here's what values you stand for. And, and I would say, yeah, ballot designation, building slate, getting your paperwork done, turned in early, getting on the ballot is the first part of that battle, even. And then, as everybody else has said, you can put together a pack, and that's when you really get it. It's a mini get out the vote. It's like ADEMS on crack, basically. And sometimes, like for myself, I ran against 20 or 30 people each time, and they only picked the top 6. So I do agree with, I think it was Mark who pointed out, reaching out to other people who are running and saying, hey, if I win, do you want to be my alternate? And if you win, will you make me yours? And like cut those deals early. So next.
Yeah. Mark, you can go next.
No, just the same thing that my colleague had said was, the ballot designation worksheet. That's the main one, and I think you just have to write a couple of sentences proving that that's your occupation. I think Sarah was asking specifically on her environmental voter side. Depending on your area, community organizers sometimes does pull well. It surprisingly still does today. But it depends on your area. I think to Becca's point about being in San Diego, being in a veteran space or veteran advocate space does well. So it's also contingent on that. In LA in particular, being an educator also does really well, or a teacher, or another sort of, aspect to that, where if you're a community college teacher or any sort of educational background, you prove that. For us here, particularly in LA, it's vote for no more than 7. For us, because it's after redistricting, some of our folks who are technically incumbents are no longer considered incumbents because it's a new district. So for this year, anybody from running for re-election, incumbent is not an option. However, you were elected to the Central Committee, and so the only part that you can go more than 3 words, to Beckett's point, is member, comma, County Central Committee. Or if you were appointed to fill a spot in a vacancy within that AD, you could put appointed member, comma, County Central Committee, and that's considered the title. So if you're lucky in that capacity where you can do that, folks often reflect on the name of the office to what your ballot designation is, and that often does well. And then also keeping in mind that the order of the ballot or your name is randomized. It's not alphabetical order. And so that's also something to keep in mind as well. So if you have a last name of Z, don't worry. It doesn't necessarily mean you're last, but it also doesn't mean you're first. It just is a random sort of drawing that the Secretary of State does. But part of that is putting those 3 different titles. The tenants' right advocate is a great example of a law student. Sometimes students do okay, but it depends on your area. So the tenants' right advocate is strong, especially given a renters district, right? And so that also is reflective of the community. So you have 3 possibilities of doing that. They'll contact you usually in advance if you get your signatures in on time, which is another piece of that. Making sure as soon as you get them, you turn them in immediately, so that gives you some wiggle room by the time the deadline comes to make sure that you fix any errors, including your ballot designation. But to the point of my colleagues, they don't really check on that, but they just want to make sure that you are being truthful and factual in your statement, and that is exactly your occupation. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really important to keep in mind, but putting those other options as well are also key, and being honest about what you do. But community, we can put organizer / advocate, or in what specific arena, or environmental justice advocate, maybe for Sierra's question. But you can do something to that as well. Mother, fathers, I think, also plays well. Depends on your area.
Thank you. And Igor.
Yeah, they covered it. It's so 4 years ago, I was still on the Berkeley Rent Board, so that is the one exception as well. If you hold an elected office, you can say, Commissioner, Berkeley Rent Stabilization Board. That's the one exception. This year, I'll let you know on March 20th whether I made the right choice or the wrong choice by putting incumbent as my ballot designation. I tried really hard to put chair of the county committee, but there's a checklist where you have to check every box has to be no, and that one,
Put your
I got
email
called out.
as chair.
Yeah. I tried. I would agree with everything that has been said. Yeah, and sometimes it's just the same terminology that or different terminology that describes the same subject matter. Environment versus climate. You're not going to be able to get, a poll, but you can ask 10 people who just, it can be folks on the street, what sounds better to you? Climate justice organizer or environmental organizer, and you'll be able to get some really good input. It is true that that is probably one of the most important things that you're going to do is your ballot designation. So no pressure. However, there's still some things that you can do for the duration of your race. First of all, the League of Women Voters, they can be your best friend when you are a candidate. They will, make sure to put your contact info, make your contact info available when you file to vote. That is the way that folks will be able to contact you. If you make your email available and you regularly check your email and look out for this, and you'll get multiple pings. The League of Women Voters has a online tool where You can be a little bit more descriptive around your ballot designation. It's not limited to 3 words. You can have your photo. You can talk about the issues that you will serve. It's called voter edge. So especially in more urban areas where folks pay attention to this, it's good for quite a few hundred, maybe a few thousand votes if you really take the time for that. Folks will look at it. And then, like I said, field really matters. And it may seem on the margins because there's just no way you're going to be able to go to every household. You just can't. It's a big district. Wherever you're running, whether it's assembly-wide or county district-wide, you won't be able to go to every household. You need to prioritize. County lists are good if you're able to raise the money, especially if you are on a slate and can work together to pool funds to do this. I definitely recommend getting a PDI account or another voter activation network. And you can do things like text bank for high propensity Democratic voters. You can mail, you can actually take your walk piece once designed and mail it to a subset of voters. Obviously, the more money you're able to raise, I recommend raising from the grassroots so that you can say you're a corporate-free candidate. But folks will give you money, especially if you have a message that will resonate with them. And you can do a lot with that. And it does matter in the margins. I'll go back to, I started out when the first count was done, when I first ran. I was in 11th or 12th spot, and there were 8 seats at that time. And by the time it was done, I was in 6th, and I think it was all the day off and the week before grassroots action that we did.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and part of the reason why CYD is like taking these central committee races so seriously is because of this ballot designation thing, where like if you're running for ADEM, it's very difficult to win. And obviously it varies by region, varies by district, but it's very difficult to win if you're not part of a slate. Like in central committee, you can really have an upset victory by being like having a very good ballot designation. So like we're of the belief that if a lot of young Democrats run for these positions, like we can really increase our voices in our counties and at the statewide level. So if I would want any of you to take anything from this is like run, take a chance on yourself and do it. Obviously you want to check in your personal situation and see if it's something you're able to do, but I would encourage you more likely than not, you should run. But with that being said, raise your hand if you're considering running. All right, we have a lot of hands raised. Yeah. I should raise my hand too. All right. Now, okay, so quite a couple of folks on here. All right, now let's lower our hands so we have like a few more minutes so we can get a couple more questions in. Let's see. Now raise your hand if you have a question for the panelists.
Sierra asked, can you be on multiple slates? Yes. Depends on the slate. Some only want you on their slate. For central committee, that's a little bit stricter. I've seen in ADEMs where it's like a very short time period. For central committee, I notice people do tend to be on multiple slates. I would say, yeah, Igor hit the nail on the head. It depends on the unique nature of slate politics in your county. I would say it's better to ask and then be told no, or be told the dynamics of what they're looking for on a slate than to just not ask. I mean, along those lines, don't let all the talk about money and fundraising and everything scare you. I did not fundraise my first time. I volunteered I was working a campaign and volunteering on another one. And I got to know a lot of the volunteers who told my name to other people they were talking to. So there's more than one way. You don't have to raise a whole bunch of money and get on a bunch of slates. It really does depend. Sometimes it's almost a matter of if you happen to be the first name on the ballot, they do it randomly. It's not who turns in their paperwork first or who's not. They just randomly, mix up the names and then throw them on there. Sometimes it's a matter of like the first 6 people get just more votes because that's the way it is for no rhyme or reason. So, I mean, if anything, you would help get your name recognition up for the next race.
All right, and let's do one more question if we have one more. Raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, it looks like that's all. Thank you all for joining. I hope if you took anything from this call, it's that you want to run. I think we have a lot of diverse voices here and a lot of folks that would make the party an even better place. So thank you all for joining, and we'll continue to figure out how to help our young Dems to run for these positions or not. We're actually considering Central Committee endorsements for young Democrats at convention. So make sure to talk to your regional director and let them know if you're running or not so we can consider endorsing you. I see, Ron, you have your hand raised. Okay. Okay, so with that being said, I will stop the recording now and thank you all for